Punk6529, are you online?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can indeed. There's some sort of echo, but I think that'll be figured out. All right, let's go. Sick of talking about markets, but one quick market question before we continue. How's the market holding up for NFTs?
Surprisingly better than I would have expected. I mean, NFTs should be the highest beta asset in the space. They're the youngest part of the space. It looks like they're down, I don't know, 15, 20%, which is similar to other things. I'm a little bit surprised, to be honest. I think there might be a little bit of not complete overlap between NFT holders and, heavy traders. I think it's somewhat a different community, so maybe it's not quite as instantly linked as you would have expected. But, it is the smallest, newest, youngest part of the crypto space, so I'd expect it to continue to be volatile.
So, oh, there is an echo. How would you characterize you talked about the overlap between heavy traders of fungible tokens and owners or holders of NFTs. How would you characterize the differences in the market dynamics? So in the in the fungible space, some tokens have gone really, really far down, close to zero. Others stay high. How does it work in the NFT space in your experience?
Well, I think NFTs trade very differently, right? Because they're non-fungible. And so any fungible token, the price is set at the margin, right? The market cap is set at the margin. Here, it's not clear that a collection price is set at the margin. It is to some degree for quote-unquote floor NFTs, right, that are the most fungible part. But on the high end, I think they're going to trade differently because there's just so few of them, right? And so you could imagine in certain collections a quite small number of people just being sort of impervious to day-to-day swings, right? And I think that's what we'll see. I think we'll see, most collections will trade poorly, like an altcoin. Maybe even the floors of many even decent collections will trade that way. But I do think the high end of very well-established collections might trade more like art right now than crypto coin.
Got it. So with the fungible tokens, you have different baskets. You have blue chip fungible tokens, Bitcoin, ETH, those things, and then you've got the tail end. You've got kind of mid-tier, and then you've got the altcoins at the very low end, and they kind of trade differently. But you're saying even within one single NFT collection, because they're not fungible, you might get some particularly rare ones perhaps, or particularly attractive ones trading like very differently to, even within the same collection, to the floor ones full of common attributes. I guess this reminds me a little bit of property. Buildings in a certain area, in a certain geographical region, or city, or something like that. Makes sense. Okay, we don't have long. Let's talk about Open Metaverse. If you could describe a little bit about Open Metaverse, OM, and how it's different from other virtual worlds that people describe as metaverses, such as Roblox or Minecraft.
Yeah, certainly. And I think what's important is I need to take a step back. And I suspect I have a fairly different definition of metaverse than most people you'll talk to or you'll read about. For me, the important thing is not that the metaverse or a metaverse is going to be a Second Life #2, right? Or a Roblox #2. For me, the metaverse is just the internet. It's the internet in a decade. And it is the internet with two distinctions from today. The first distinction is the visualization will get better and better and better. So over the last 20 or 30 years, the internet used to be primarily text-based. I'm watching you full video streaming on my laptop, right? We did not have free global video conferencing a decade ago. We now do. Today, we are on the web as a whole, seeing some progress on 3D rendering in the browser. And in a decade, it will be primarily augmented reality, right? You'll have a pair of sunglasses, you'll be in your day-to-day life, and digital objects will come in and out of your field of vision. That's where we end up. So one is better visualization. The second, though, that's super important is persistent digital objects. And what's a persistent digital object? My punk avatar is a persistent digital object. It can appear on my Twitter feed. It can appear in a virtual world. It can appear in a game, on a lending platform, on any arbitrary application. And to me, the only thing that matters about the open metaverse is who gets to store those persistent digital objects. And there's basically two models, just like there's been since 2009, when Bitcoin was invented, about where you can store anything digital. The first model is a database, and databases are great and wonderful and very useful for many things. But if we say that we're going to store those persistent digital objects in a database, it then needs to be someone's database. And then I think we will replicate what has happened in Web 2, that you'll have 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 platforms that store your whole digital life. The alternative place it can be stored is a blockchain. And in this case, NFTs, because NFTs, I mean, fundamental to my views is NFTs are generic carriers for intangibles, right? It's not primarily going to be about cartoon avatars. This is fun and interesting, but they can carry any intangible. And if you put these persistent digital objects on a public blockchain, on a composable, interoperable public blockchain, then you separate the ownership layer, the data layer, from the application layer. And so in my mental model of what an open metaverse means in 5, 10, 15 years, is there's millions of applications from all types of different people, just like there's lots of websites on the internet. You can transport your digital objects across them under your control. And basically all the other examples you're going to talk about today, or the last large majority of them, are not going to be that model, right? Their mental model is we make a website, and our website's going to be better than someone else's website, and we would like you to commit to our website for the long run, which I understand from a corporate perspective why they want to do that, right? But I actually think it's the wrong architectural model for what effectively is going to be the internet.
Got it. I was just taking some notes there. You mentioned transporting your objects from one website to another, from one area to another. So the way I've been thinking about this is, it's not that you're moving anything. It's just that all of these things are looking at the same source of truth, which says that you are the owner of this thing. So it's one public registry, one public database that society agrees, that the society collectively agrees that this is the true version of ownership. So if everyone can agree that, everyone can get behind that, then you can have as many applications as you want, all looking at this one source of truth, saying, this is what we believe is true, therefore we'll let you do X, Y, and Z on my platform. Cool. So I've actually used Open. Has anyone used Open Metaverse before? Have you jumped in? Yep. So I've used it. Terrible graphics, of course, right? Sorry. I'm sure it'll get better. 10 years. But there is one course on there run by the University of UNIC, UNIC. I can never pronounce that word. Nicosia? Something like that?
Nicosia.
Nicosia, yes, University of Nicosia, and the course is on NFTs. Highly recommended. I don't know whether you can jump in right now. You had to sign up earlier, but it's a free course given by some of the world's top NFT people. So I've been in there, participated in that, but it's still pretty terrible. As a user experience, it's still pretty terrible. We're not there with the head-mounted displays, with the goggles. We're not there with the graphics. I play a ton of computer games which have much, much better graphics than this. So what are the concrete steps to adoption, and what order do things happen in your view?
Sure. Look, I love this question because I think it's a fundamental distinction about what people are trying to do and where they're trying to do it and how they're trying to do it. First of all, in my mental model, crypto Twitter, NFT Twitter, is a form of metaverse. And the only graphics needed for that to work are little avatars, right? Because metaverses are social networks, right? I understand and appreciate that there's a whole other segment of the world called gaming, right? But gaming is a specific usage case for a specific type of person. And to me, gaming is actually less important to be decentralized, right? Because let's imagine two views of the world. Views of the world one, we successfully decentralized gaming, but social media, productivity apps, your day-to-day heads-up display and all those things are centralized. Have we accomplished anything important for decentralization? My answer is no, right? And so then, if you're thinking about the non-gaming usage cases, well, first of all, it's not even clear to me that today, 3D graphics, certainly not virtual reality. I spend zero time in virtual reality, right? For sure, the metaverse is not primarily about virtual reality today, right? It's clunky, it doesn't, the battery life's not there, no one wants to walk around with a VR headset all day long. Like, none of that's important today. And then the question is, well, why are the graphics not super high resolution like a high-end game? Well, it's very simple. It's accessibility, right? If anything, the graphics are too heavy right now. And if you notice, even Meta has very simplistic graphics, right? It's not because Facebook doesn't have money. It's not because they couldn't buy servers. It's not about they couldn't hire game developers. The high-resolution gaming-oriented graphics will restrict you to a certain set of end-user devices, right? It will restrict you to a certain type of user. It makes multiplayer much more difficult. And I'm not sure it's that important because what I would say the closest thing to a metaverse right now are basically in 2D graphics. It's something like Twitter, it's something like Facebook, and so on. Now, what the interesting design space exploration is, to me, is what things might be better in this more immersive environment. And I'm going to posit that outside of gaming, effectively nobody's figured this out, right? You saw Meta's user numbers, they're not very good, right? And they're starting with 2.5 billion people. And I think the interest, and you'll see all of the pre-existing metaverses, decentralized or not decentralized, they're all ghost towns right now, right? And that's okay, because we're at the beginning. And I think one interesting mental model, at least it's my mental model, is trying to provide, like if you ask me, what's a mental model for 𝐸𝐻𝐻, right? Mental model for 𝐸𝐻𝐻 is something like WordPress. If you use 𝐸𝐻𝐻 type building blocks, if you use WordPress to build your website, it doesn't mean you'll have a lot of traffic, but some websites will have a lot of traffic, right? And that's what, we're not there yet. We're probably another 3 to 6 months away for the tech stack to be completely decentralized. And then we'll see what things are effective. We saw a glimmer of interest in education. The courses, as you say, people seem to like that space. We're seeing a lot of activity on artist galleries. People seem to like that. I'll tell you what has not been at all effective. PFP communities do not seem that they want to hang out with each other in a 3D space. There was a lot of excitement at first, and they all said, oh yeah, let's do this, and then no one actually did anything. And that's okay. There's a massive design space. We will figure out over time which activities might benefit from the expressiveness. And for me, this is not to say that someone shouldn't or couldn't build the decentralized games, and many people are going to do that. But for me, it's slightly less important because games are not systemic to, our future digital world.
Got it. Thank you. So my takeaways here is, I think for a lot of people, they've been told that metaverse is all about photorealism and total sensory immersion, and you're saying it's less about this photorealism right now. In the future, the graphics will get better, but right now it's more about social. It's more about accessibility. And you mentioned earlier it's around persistent digital objects that can be surfaced in different applications. You mentioned that Open Metaverse was a bit like WordPress. So WordPress is a tool that people can use to build their own websites, and some will be crappy and some will be good, some will attract eyeballs and some won't. And then the really successful ones will perhaps become more centralized. They'll become big and successful, they'll put up walls, they'll put up barriers to entry. So what is to stop someone building a highly successful, centralized space in Open Metaverse or any of these virtual worlds, and bring in the same kinds of barriers to free speech and censorship that we're seeing today? What's to stop someone building Facebook or its equivalent on Open Metaverse, and then we're just repeating the same old things that we have today?
Well, nothing's preventing them from doing that, but I think there's an important distinction as follows. My mental model, again, goes back to Web 1 and Web 2, and let's take email. Email is a protocol called SMTP, right? Short messaging, at least in the English language world, is basically Twitter, right? The difference between SMTP and Twitter is gigantic. SMTP is a public protocol. Yes, is Gmail a gigantic centralized provider on SMTP? Sure. Is Outlook? Sure. But are those the only two places you can go to send an email? No, there's of course thousands of email providers. And even if you don't like any of those thousands of email providers, you can run your own email server. And so because of that, we don't get into these types of absurd global fights that says this person or this other person is or isn't allowed to have an email account, and that is for some reason determined by who the CEO of Twitter is, right? Which is a completely, in my opinion, ridiculous architecture we've ended up with. That for 2 years, it's been an issue of global concern who the CEO of Twitter is to see who has access to the dominant short messaging platform. We don't have that in email, even though Gmail is a very important and big product. Nobody knows who the product manager of Gmail is, because if Gmail made proposals like, we're going to pick and choose who gets an email account, or we're going to say, if you transact business through Gmail, like Apple does, we're going to take 30% of all your business, right? No, you just closed the deal using Gmail, we're going to take 30% of the equity. Of course, everyone would defect, and they can because it's a common standard. You cannot defect from Twitter and keep tweeting. And so if we accept that as a matter of principle, we represent the ownership of digital objects as NFTs, then someone can make a super highly centralized service, and maybe it's super successful and valuable, and I use Gmail and I use Outlook, and I'm perfectly fine with that. And I could bring Punk6529 into that service, and if that service did something ridiculous, I can take Punk6529 somewhere else. I'm not trapped into that service because the interoperable layer is at the NFT level. And that's all we need to accomplish. I am not against big business, actually. I am not against centralized. I am not against permissioned and centralized systems. It's just permission and centralized systems have to be built on top of permissionless and decentralized systems. You can't go the other way. Right? It's the same mental model as Bitcoin. You can build a permissioned payment system on top of Bitcoin. You can't go the other way around that. You can't build a permissionless one on top of Fedwire.
Got it. So my analogy takeaway there, you got SMTP and Twitter, and people who run email servers don't seem to be as accountable for the content which passes through those protocols as people who run social media platforms. So maybe there's a decentralization / protocol thing versus a central business concept to play around with there. We've got 30 seconds left. This has been quick. So last question. In a bear market, what's your message to investors, creators, and consumers as it relates to this space?
Well, we are where Bitcoin was in 2013. The overall space maybe has a market cap of $10, $15 billion. To me, the biggest mispricing, in quotes, not really pricing question is, non-fungible tokens are maybe 1%, 2% of fungible tokens. There is vastly more unexplored space in non-fungibles. They can represent larger asset classes, both intangible and tangible asset classes than fungible coins can. And so this is a classic time that people should just be building. There's years of infrastructure development ahead of us in non-fungibles. And just like for a decade, I've been fairly indifferent to market cycles. I'm indifferent to market cycles here. I don't think it matters that much. Either the concept works and it'll be fine and we'll go through winters and summers, or it doesn't, and then we will all end up in someone's closed playground. And I hope it's not the latter. The market cycles themselves, I don't think matter so much.
Perfect, great message. Keep building. Well, guys, thank you very much. This has been Punk6529. Please round of applause. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.